last presentation, we're not supposed to be waiting. So I am going to go ahead and introduce myself. Well, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'm coming off of a pretty bad cold or some kind of infection, so I may be coughing a little bit as I go along. I'm Rebecca Moncur. I'm the director for Gear Up here at Northwest College, and I'm going to be talking about improving FAFSA completion rates for Gear Up. Well, so one of the questions that I asked in the poll is, what are some of the barriers your students encounter whenever they come to do their FAFSA? Does anybody want to share some of that?
I have several students that have a parent that is not a citizen, so getting the parent signature page printed, signed, and sent in snail mail. A lot of times I give them the parent signature page and it sticks in the backpack and never gets signed and never gets sent.
So we're going to talk about that in this presentation. I'm glad you brought that up. That's great. Some of the other things that I'm seeing is parents completing their tax return, especially farmers and ranchers are a little bit slow to do that. Tricky family situations. We will discuss that. Students having trouble with the access to their parents' tax returns. We'll discuss some of that, hopefully. Parents not being a citizen, parents not cooperative, cooperation from parents. So here we go. This seems to be a trend, cooperation with parents and making it a priority and not putting it off. So we'll talk about all of these situations. I'm glad that the poll results bring that up, because I think that's exactly how we've geared this. So why is it important to gear up? Of course, we're a program that's gaining early awareness and readiness for undergraduate programs. And one of our 9 objectives is that 60% of our Gear Up Wyoming 12th graders will complete the FAFSA. And I'm going to say this, that I think that it should be 100% of the Gear Up seniors will complete their FAFSA if they're able to legally. If they're not completing their FAFSA, then they're probably not going to go to college. So we'll talk a little bit about what we do here at Northwest College. This year we did have 100%. We also have objectives that are affected by the FAFSA. 55% of our seniors are supposed to enroll in post-secondary education by the fall following their high school graduation. Well, if they don't have any financial aid, that's a real barrier to post-secondary education. So they need to get their FAFSA done. We also have the persistence objective number 5. That is, again, a lot of it is based on, do they have enough money to come back to college? And so they need to do their FAFSA in order to determine their financial aid package. 45% of our parents need to have activities associated with understanding or obtaining scholarships and financial aid. So we need to be talking to our parents about the FAFSA. And finally, the CPP number 3, summer melt, in which we need to be making sure that our college seniors are ready to matriculate into college come fall by completing thank you notes, verification, etc. And sometimes we need to actually make sure that they've they've completed their FAFSA at that time. But hopefully we've done it before then. So I'm going to start with, I want to start with something that isn't in the slide, and it is kind of based on what these parents not cooperating at our site, and I'm sure at many of your sites, we start as soon as the student is in Gear Up, talking to their parents about the FAFSA. And we make it pretty clear that it's expected of them to do the FAFSA in their senior year, and that the parents will have to provide information for that. And one of the things that we talk about is, doing the FAFSA doesn't mean that you're going to have to pay for all the college. And it doesn't mean that some people have issues with giving their social security number and stuff to FAFSA. And sometimes we just need to remind them that the federal government already has their social security number. And then they go, oh yeah, that's right. So we also repeat this yearly. It actually comes in every parent contact that we make with our parents. So by the time their students get to be seniors, they pretty well know, and a lot of them are excited to get it done. Why is it important to do it early? The FAFSA opens on October 1st, and most need-based scholarships are determined by the FAFSA. And especially as colleges in Wyoming are adjusting to budget cuts, many of them have reduced their scholarships, their institutional scholarships. So this makes it much more competitive. And at Northwest College, it's first come, first serve. So that early bird does get the worm. Also, we like to encourage many of our students to do the Daniel Scholarship, which opens October 1st and closes November 15th. The Jack Kent Cook closes on October 30th. The Hagen Scholarship, December 1st. So if they're not doing the FAFSA early, they're going to miss out on some of these opportunities. There's also, not all of our students go to college in Wyoming. Many of our students go, well, not many, but some of our students go outside of Wyoming, and some of them attend highly selective schools that have early action and early decision. And with that application deadline being in November, that means that they need to have that FAFSA done early. And even with these highly selective schools, regular decision is in January. So they really need to get a move on getting that FAFSA done. Plus, we use the momentum of the opening of the FAFSA to help propel us to get those FAFSAs done early. So most colleges require a FAFSA on file before they award any institutional scholarships. These scholarships often account for the greatest amount of non-grant aid a student will receive. So it makes it important for all students to complete the FAFSA no matter the level of their affluence. One of the things that I didn't say when I introduce myself is that I used to work for the Educational Opportunity Center. And at that time, I served about 400 people a year and probably did about 200 FAFSAs a year. Even now, I will do 100, 150 FAFSAs a year with students. And it's always interesting to me. I'll have many per year say, oh, we won't qualify for Pell Grants because my parents make too much money. You'll be surprised how many of them actually do qualify for the Pell Grant, because students don't really have a good idea of wealth or especially if they're farmers and ranchers. They may own a lot of property, but not have much money. And it's all going in back into the farm. So I don't really get too many farmers and ranchers that aren't Pell eligible in our area. Excuse me. At Northwest College, we schedule FAFSA events early. This is an exam. This is what we did last year. All of these were scheduled in August and early September. I'm really, really grateful that I have a good partner to work with in the Educational Opportunity Center, Morgan Patrick. She actually does a lot of heavy lifting of getting these presentations and, well, these events scheduled. They're not normally not presentations, but and then she and I work the events together. So we can work a pretty good sized room and work with a lot of students at one time, or we work individually. And sometimes we have to bounce situations off of each other, because between her and I, we've seen and heard it all, I think. So we schedule these with the schools very early on, and then we start getting flyers out. I know Cool Speak didn't like the flyers, and maybe they aren't as successful as some of the other things, but we always send more than one flyer out, and text and emails go out at the same time. And the day of the event, somebody from our office is calling everybody to remind them to show up to the event. And sometimes, well, always, I take a list of phone numbers and contact information with me so that I can text them and say, where are you? I'm here waiting. And it pretty well works. I don't get stood up too much. We also, at the time of the mailing, send out these documents to help them build their FSA ID, hopefully before they come. They don't, of course, have to build their FSA ID before they come to the financial aid to the FAFSA meeting, but it certainly helps it go faster. We have found that if a student and parent records their information on this, and then we also give them an accordion folder to hold all their financial aid information and FAFSA information in, if they'll keep these things in that accordion folder, then we don't have too much trouble with them not losing their FSA ID or getting jammed up because they don't have it with them. So we highly recommend this, and I don't think they've been uploaded yet, but we will provide these to you so you can use and change them. So parents, I think if you noted it back there in our, let's go back. Many of our presentation or our FAFSA events are held during the day, and we usually have more than one meeting per school in case somebody does miss their meeting. But parents don't have to be at the meetings. We just need their information. So it's helpful. It is helpful if students can call their parent for more information, but if they'll bring the information that we ask them to the meeting, we're able to complete the FAFSA while they're at school. And most of our schools allow seniors to be pulled out of class to complete this important step towards college. When I first started setting up those kind of meetings, because many of us have probably been in the situation where we'll have a night meeting and we sit there forever and two people come. And you just think, oh, this is a huge waste of my time and I'm not getting my objective done either, not helping anybody. So I started getting this idea, if we could just do it during school, then we'd have those students and we wouldn't be waiting around for them. And I went in and talked to administrators, and a lot of them just said, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And some of them kind of balked. And when they did, I would say, well, you know, at Lovell High School, they do it this way. And that would be enough to kind of spur them, well, okay, I think we can do that. And so it's been highly successful since then. So this is one of the postcards that we use. This is one of the documents that I think is one of the most successful ways to gather information for a student to bring to a meeting. We send out these postcards, well, sometimes more than one time. And, excuse me, it indicates that they need to bring their 1040, their federal tax information, including their W-2s, their FAFSA ID, their FSA ID and password for both the parent and student, the Social Security numbers, dates of birth, date of marriage or divorce and separation, the amount of child support paid or received, the current balance of the parent's checking, cash and savings, and other information on savings accounts, mutual funds, investments. It's really easy for a student to bring this card in and the tax forms, and it's not so daunting for them to come. It's if they can fill that information, that needed information out on the this little card, it just makes it easier in their mind, I think. And our counselors also put them on the doors of their lockers, etc. They get them more than just from us. So everybody seems to really benefit from this. You know, when I said that parents don't need to come, like I said, it's really important if the student brings all this information, and in order to link the FAFSA, we'd have to have that parent FSA ID and password. It's really important that a student, it's nice if we have a parent on the phone whenever we sign the FAFSA. That makes it more legal. Otherwise, a parent and a student can go ahead and do that night at home and have the parent, you know, you save it to the signature page, and then the parent and student can sign then and submit. But it's just so much better if they do it in front of you. Then you know everything went through, and it's all good for them. So here's just some basic facts. There are the Pell Grant for 2021-22 is $6,000. This is the full maximum Pell, $6,495. The form opens on October 1st and closes of June 30th of the award year. So it will close the 2021-22. It will close the on 6/30/22. It's important that you always check that the students have chosen the correct year. Since multiple years, 2 years are open at one time, sometimes students get confused. They'll choose the year that it is currently because it's that year. I mean, the date is that year, and they are not thinking in advance. So if you have sat with a student and they have done the FAFSA and everything, and you wonder, now, why hasn't this shown up at the school yet? First thing to do is make sure that they've done that. But really, if you've sat with them, you've directed them to the correct year. I think this year we didn't have that happen once, and that was huge. If it does happen, then they can just do the FAFSA as a renewal, so it'll go really fast too. Dependent students and their parents must have an FSA ID. independent students do not use the parents' information. There are 7 segments to the FAFSA, and you can use the tabs on the top to access each one of them, to go back and forth in case you have a question, did I do this right, or I need to fix this, or whatever. How's everybody doing? Am I going too fast? What are some of the pitfalls that you find with the FSA ID?
Before we talk about pitfalls, Andrea has a question.
Yes, okay.
So yeah, please come to the front.
So I don't have to shout and you don't have to repeat me. And you said you used the momentum of the opening of the FAFSA to get your event started. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, I guess because we're going to start our parent meetings, our parent kickoff meetings here in just a couple of weeks. And we have generally about 80% of our parents show up because of we give out school supplies. And at that time, all of our senior parents, we're like going, the FAFSA is going to start on the 1st of October. And we're going to be ready. We'll have lots of events. We'll be there for your student. We kind of ramp it up that way. And excuse me. And another way we do it is that we have an event on October 1st. And usually it's a big event here at Northwest College. We have pizza, we have prizes, we have all kinds of giveaways and that kind of stuff, and we'll name it. I think last year we called it the masquerade because it was in October and we all had to wear a mask. So, we do things like that. We try to put together a real I don't know, like it's fun to do your FAFSA events kind of thing. I guess that's what I'm talking about.
And then my second question was, so you're planning FAFSA events in August and September. What do those look like? What do you accomplish? I guess, is it just like more of a presentation? Because obviously you're not completing the FAFSA.
And to add to that,
No.
like some of those are like full day events too. So yeah, I'm curious what they look like as well.
Let me go back to that. Those FAFSA events, they're almost all individual. They're all individual meetings with students.
Oh, and they're all.
And they are just scheduled during the day at the schools or at night at the schools. So does that make it clear? They're not, and we do them early so we can get it out to the families multiple times. So as soon as school is open and we have access to the counselors or whoever's in charge of scheduling, we get them scheduled up.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess I misheard you because I couldn't see your graph when I was in the back, but I thought you had said they were in August and September, but now I see their October dates.
They're October dates, but we schedule them in August. What's interesting is now more and more of our schools are trying to fight for that real early date because they know how important it is to get that FAFSA done early. So we'll have them all fighting for that first week, and then we have to just adjust as it goes.
Cool, awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we want to quickly talk about the pitfalls question that you had, Rebecca?
Yeah, what kind of pitfalls do you all find with FSA ID? Let's start with the FSA ID because I find that it's the most annoying part of the whole situation.
A lot of times, a parent, I don't know, took online classes or went to college, and so they had one set up, but it was like 5 years ago or something, and that parent doesn't remember their info. I had a student just this last year, and mom had been in and out of prison, And so, but mom had gone to college at one point. Well, nobody knew what mom's info was. So then we had to go back. I mean, we were trying to reset passwords and everything. And it literally took us multiple days of getting together to try and get this kid an ID. I mean, it was awful.
Did you catch that, Rebecca?
Not really.
So apparently one student's parent was kind of in and out of prison and had also been to college like 5-10 years in the past. And so they had a lot of trouble retrieving that parent's information from when they were in college to get the student's FSA ID set up.
Okay,
You
so,
have to have that parents, you have to have.
So yeah, just like disconnect, like, yeah, that timeline and in and out of college. And
Yeah.
so were they still incarcerated at the time?
No, actually, the parent was out and she's doing wonderful and all that good stuff, but it literally took us multiple days of having to get together to try to figure out how to go back in, reset mom's password, try to set up her ID. I mean, it was a mess. Both of us were getting frustrated, me and the student lives with her grandparents, but her grandparents don't have custody of her. Dad refused to give his information. So it was just back and forth for days of us trying to set up a ID for this poor kid.
Okay, so I'm going to address some of this as we go further along, and I'd like to save it to the end. But what you're describing with the FSA ID, while the incarceration part is not common, there is a commonality in that these FSA IDs on parents can get real snarled up. And I'm going to suggest one of the things, there's some common pitfalls here, but if I go forward, if it gets to the point, number one, when you start getting into where you're not able to help, call the FSA ID people. I have never had trouble. These people that work for FAFSA and FSA ID, they are amazing. They are very responsive and they can always resolve the issue. Now, if they have to resolve the issue by totally resetting or deleting the account, then it's going to take some time, up to 10 days to get that done. But sometimes they're able to fix it in real time. All they have to do is, the parent, all they have to do is log back on and log back in, log back off and in. So I would say before you get to the total frustration point, call the pros at FSA ID and FAFSA. And it's never a long wait too. This is not like calling the Social Security office. It's not like that at all. They're wonderful people.
Right. Well, we had a parent that just finished school 2 years ago, I think, because she's an RN now, and she couldn't remember her stuff either. So then when me and the son went in to try to set up his, I wish that you didn't have to have your parents' past info in order to start your own FSA ID. It would make things a lot simpler.
did you catch that?
Yeah, I really don't, I don't really understand that you have to have you do have to have your parents' information, but you don't have to have their password and ID to build your own FSA ID, just to do the FAFSA. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, but so how come when we tried going in as the student, the parents' info somehow comes up and you have to have their info?
I know how this happened. I know
Okay.
exactly how this happened. Let's go through these real quick. Okay, so you have to use number one. Okay, I'm going to start with this. Everybody, we think it's a gimme that you're going to know your own name, right? But there are, especially with parents, Some parents use their names differently in different situations. They may use their maiden name for this situation and their married name for this situation, or they hyphenate in this situation. It's kind of crazy, okay? So very first thing when you're working with parents, make sure that they are told their name has to match the Social Security card, okay? Then there's sometimes, this is obvious, typos with the birth date and Social Security, and then it won't verify. But this is what I think has happened in your case. The student has a lot of times, sometimes our parents go in and make an FSA ID for their students. And they do it using their own information. They do it using the student's name and Social Security and the parent's phone number and email. And if they do that, and they do that because the students at school, the parent can then validate the FSA ID on their email or phone, and don't have to wait for the student. And so unfortunately, then the student, and this happens more often than not, the student goes in and can't, their information is already in the system, but it's not under their phone, and they can't, it's a big snarled up mess, okay? So we start out real early saying you have to use the student has to use their own non-high school issued email and phone number, and do not use the parents' information for the student, because that's how that kind of stuff happens. And then some people don't remember, and they don't understand why this is happening. And sometimes you won't understand why it's happening because you're going, what? Anyway, that's usually what it is. And then you have to go in and manage that FSA ID, get things changed around.
Right.
Thank
you.
All right. So, and we'll cover this at the end if we have time. Federal student aid resources. Federal student aid has resources to help you work with your students. They have tools, fact sheets, videos. It's so cool. This is the address that you access those on. So here's some of the common pitfalls and mistakes on the FAFSA. Males, when they click no for the selective service question, because they're only 17, and of course they haven't registered for selective service, then they need to make sure that they click yes on the next question. Would you like to be registered with selective service? If they click yes, it'll automatically register them when they turn 18, and they have no verification issues. If they say no, then they're going to have to provide documentation that they're registered, and it's just going to snarl up verification. Some people have this problem. I don't have that much problem with they don't know how much child support they've paid or received. Generally, anyone who's paid child support, they know exactly how much they paid, and people who receive it know how much they're receiving and how many months they received it for, and we can calculate it right then and there. This does happen, that a student changes their mind. I mean, gosh, March Madness is when they all change their mind on where they're going to college, and March, April, and May, I would say that. So they may end up choosing a college that they didn't include on their FAFSA, and all they need to do is add that on the FAFSA. And that doesn't open the FAFSA if they do it correctly, it doesn't open the FAFSA so that it reprocesses, because every time a student opens the FAFSA, it reprocesses, If they change any information or don't change any information, it will reprocess. And if a student wasn't chosen for verification the first time, they may be chosen the second time. And I've had this happen time after time and time. So if they don't have to open that FAFSA, they should not do it. Okay, which parent to use? Is it anybody else have any other pitfalls that they encounter with the FAFSA? Okay, so divorced, separated, or unmarried parents, they only need to use one parent. And it's a common misunderstanding that the parent must file the FAFSA with the one that claims them as a dependent on their taxes. And this is not true. This is often set by the divorce agreements, in which sometimes it's the parent that makes the most money, or they go back and forth every year. What is true is that the student should file the FAFSA with the parent that they live with the most throughout the year. Now, sometimes a student, and this is, I mean, you will hit this every year, I think. A student will say, I live equal amounts of time with both of my parents. I either go this week with, back and forth on the weeks, or back and forth on the months. If that's the case, then you need to remember that your customer is your student. You're trying to help them find the best financial aid, and they should honestly use the parent with the least amount of money. Now, they can't do that if that parent lives or making the least amount of money. If that parent lives in a different state, obviously that's not going to work. But if they live in the same town and they're going back and forth, use the parent with the least amount of resources. If a parent has remarried, then that student has to use the step parent's income. And I would say that this is one of the more trickier household problems or family problems, because sometimes those step parents do not want to give their information to a stepchild because they don't want to pay for their college. And they just need to be reminded that they won't have to. That's not what this is about.
Hey, Rebecca.
But still, you still may have, some heartburn.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just was looking on the student aid resource that you just said, and I just printed, they have a really nice little flow chart of the little, ask your little questions, and it kind of helps you flow through that a little bit. It's a visual, I guess, and it's helped a couple of my parents. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that really quick.
Thank you. That's great.
Do you have a digital version of that?
I'll show you, Alex, where it is at the end. Okay.
Okay, because then we could just share it with everybody.
Yes. So anybody having any questions about separated parents, it can be legal or not legally separated, as long as they're living separate lives. And sometimes, I hate to say this, sometimes they live in the basement because they can't afford any place else to live. And so that gets kind of tricky. But anyway, I have encountered that too. Who needs their parent? Anybody who answers no to all of these questions needs their parents' information. And most of these are going to be our students. Our students are not 24. They are not married. For the most part, not married. I do have, in my case, some of my students get married in the summer. Sometimes, I don't know. Sometimes it's better to wait to get the FAFSA done. It kind of depends on that. None of our students are going to be working towards graduate degrees. Most of them don't have children that they provide more than half of the support for. They don't have other dependents. However, I will say I have had one student who filed head of household for his family because his mother was completely unable to take care of his siblings and him. And so he did. And that was the most unusual FAFSA I've ever done. But, or it wasn't unusual, but it was certainly the most unusual circumstance. They're not in the armed forces and they're not veterans. But now let's look at these last three. At any time since the age of 13, were both of their parents deceased? Were they in foster care, or were they a ward or dependent of the court? I've had generally at least one or two a year fall in this category, where they're in foster care or their parents are deceased. So that makes them independent. Were they an emancipated minor? I have never had an emancipated minor because because it's a legal process and it's expensive. So they don't do that. They just stick out the situation or whatever, or they go homeless until they're 18. Are they in a legal guardianship as determined by the court? Many of my students are not in a legal guardianship. Most of the time they've been turned over to a family member, and the parent has left a piece of paper where they've said, grandma or aunt is in charge of my kid, and anything they say is okay. And that's not a legal document. Once again, legal guardianship is expensive, and a lot of families don't go ahead and do it, especially in our demographic. So, and then finally, are you an unaccompanied youth who is homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? So let's look at this question. So at any time on or after
We have a
July.
quick question.
Yes.
From Rebecca, other
Yes.
Rebecca.
So last year we had an undocumented minor
So last year we had an undocumented minor
whose mom went to Mexico and had no social security number.
whose mom went to Mexico and had no SSN.
So how does she file if she doesn't have that information?
So how does she file in that situation?
Okay. Let's just wait just a minute. So the parent is in Mexico and the student is here and doesn't have the information. Let me just go to the next slide, because we're gonna talk a little bit about McKinney-Vento, and that'll help you know the answer to this question. All right. So the definition of homeless are individuals who lack fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. We include children and youth who are sharing the housing of others due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar situation. In my case, a similar situation most often is a parent who is absent because of usually drug and alcohol problems. Then they were unable to provide a safe home for their children. And most homeless liaisons within the schools will recognize this and declare them homeless and unaccompanied. Okay. So they also may be living in hotels or motels. Around here, it'll be living in camper trailers, in sometimes not even camping grounds, sometimes just out by the lake or something. They don't even have electricity or running water. They lack alternative, adequate accommodations. Okay. So no, I'm going to tell you this. None of your students are going to come to you and advertise this. Okay, this is tough. This is tough stuff that they don't want to share. But if your liaisons have made the right connection with their students, if you have a good relationship with the counselors at the schools, 90% of the time you'll know what's going on in the student's life. Or when you get to this question, they might kind of balk or give you a reason to ask more questions, and then you'll be able to guide them towards the correct choice. So another thing that we've encountered is a primary nighttime residence that is public, or a private place not designated for regular sleeping accommodations for human beings. Let me tell you, I've had students in barns, living in barns and hay bunks. It's on the top, in a garage, storage unit, that kind of stuff, that maybe a family member has or whatever. They don't even have access to the bathrooms. So that student falls in this category. If they're living in cars, parks, public spaces, or abandoned buildings, we don't have buses and train stations in my area, but we definitely have substandard housing. And it's interesting, I've had students be declared this way because the housing that they were living in, nobody should have been living in. So, and then migratory children who qualify as homeless for purposes of 1 through 3 here. So let's go on to unaccompanied youth, which might help Rebecca. So you define an unaccompanied youth as a child or youth not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. So there's 2 conditions that have to be present for a student to be considered unaccompanied. One, their housing arrangement meets the definition of homeless. And 2, they're not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. And so therefore, number 2, they definitely aren't in your case, Rebecca. And then you need to look back to the homeless definition. Are they in this because of economic hardship? Are they in this situation? Are they sharing housing because of economic hardship or a similar situation? Then you need to go, if they have not already been declared homeless or unaccompanied, go to the homeless liaison within the school and talk to them about the situation that this student is living in. And many times, most times, they'll go ahead and go, okay, yes, this student does qualify under the McKinney-Vento Act. Sometimes I'll have a new homeless liaison that doesn't really understand all the ins and outs, and I have to go to bat for my student, but we do it very, very kindly. We're a team for this student, right? And sometimes I've even had to say, I wonder if we should check with the state homeless liaison overseer and see what they say. And it's interesting because everybody goes, yeah, that's a good idea, and they'll come back and they say, oh yeah, the student did qualify. And why is this important, and why am I spending time on this, is because we have to be advocates for our students in financial aid. Until they get their feet up under themselves and are able to advocate for themselves with financial aid, we need to help. And if they are going to mark that box, I'm homeless or unaccompanied, they have to be able to have that paper in hand for verification saying, yes, this is my what the homeless liaison put forth for me. And many times Those people will even send them to me, and I keep them on file for that student so that they can come back and get it. And, you know, because they're not living in the best situations to keep all their paperwork, etc. So we try to be there for them. But once, like I said, this is not a situation in which they're going to be out there advertising, hey, yeah, I'm homeless. My mom can't take care of me. Nobody likes to talk about that. So it's a difficult conversation. It should never be held around anybody else in the room, other than a counselor or whatever, but no other students or parents should be around. Okay. So let's move on to parents that are concerned about providing their information because of citizenship.
I think we have one more question.
Okay, yes.
So who from the school do you want to write the letter for a student that is homeless?
Every school system has to have a homeless liaison, a designated homeless liaison, and they're the ones that the paperwork comes from.
Okay, because I have
And
a kid that's gonna be
all
a
the
senior.
counselors usually will have me talk directly to those people.
Okay. Yeah, I have a kid that's gonna be a senior this year, and his mother died about a year ago, and he basically has just been couch surfing since. Like, he stays in multiple homes in Guernsey just because everybody lets him, but he does not have a home to go to. Grandma and grandpa do not want him there because of COVID. They were all freaked out about him being there and going to school. And his biological dad is not even on the birth certificate, and he's in Mexico, I think is where he's at. So the kid literally has no one other than the places that he goes to spend the night.
So definitely, I would, if you can, at the very beginning of school, have talk to the homeless liaison about this student. Make sure the counselor knows about this student so that declaration can be made, because there's a lot of benefits for that student to be declared homeless or unaccompanied. In a normal year where you have to pay for lunch, they would get free breakfast and lunch. And I've actually had students break down crying when they realized that they weren't going to be so hungry anymore. It's tough to be in a student meeting with a senior who breaks down because they're so hungry. And also, they can get, if they have to, they can get things like shampoo, sanitary needs, things like that through the school if they're in this situation. So definitely want to advocate for their students. So just real quick, I knew I was gonna run out of time, but parents who are concerned about their citizenship, number one, it doesn't affect their students' eligibility. If the parent isn't a citizen, it doesn't affect the student's eligibility for federal student aid. And the FAFSA, in fact, does not even ask about the parent's citizenship status. They don't, if a parent doesn't have a social security number, they need to enter all zeros on the FAFSA form. Many come prepared to enter their taxpayer identification number that they use to file their income taxes. And you don't want to use that. You use all zeros. And the important part of this that I think was mentioned before was they're unable to create an FSA ID, these parents, and they're also unable to use the data retrieval tool. So you're going to have to hand fill in the FAFSA just like the olden times, and mail in and print and mail in the signature page. If the parent's there with you, have the parents sign it and you mail it, okay? Or have a signed, have a stamped, addressed envelope ready for them, and all they have to do is take it home to their mother and have them sign it, or whoever is signing it for them. Sometimes you'll still have trouble, and you may have to just call the FSA, call FAFSA and get some help with where that form is. Non-citizen students should not fill out the FAFSA. However, this shouldn't keep them from going to college. There are colleges that meet full financial need without loans and have need blind admissions. And you need to really look into this. The College Green Light has a lot of information for this, and it's really a good thing. Here at Northwest College, a student doesn't have to be a citizen in order to get financial aid from the college. And I don't withhold, well, I'm just not going to say any more about that on Gear Up institutional money. But unfortunately, the Hathaway does require citizenship, and so does Daniels and many other scholarships like that. Here's a little bit more about need blind admissions, but I think we're running out of time. If a student can't answer the question about the parents, if they didn't file income taxes, then you just put in there not going to file. If they're not able to provide because the parent won't give their information, then click I am not able to provide the parent information, and then go in and fill it out the best you can, submit it. It won't fully process, but it will cause the college to generate paperwork for sending out, well, why didn't you use the information? Do you need to use a special consideration? And in all cases, you should be available to help students with that paperwork for special consideration. Sometimes it's really difficult for students to do. We always give the after the FAFSA handouts in our packet, and hopefully Alex is going to give you access to all of these. This kind of helps that student know, but before they ever get out of we push submit, and then we start talking about what happens after. What happens for verification, where they should be checking to find out if they're chosen for verification, and what they're supposed to do. We go through that with them, so they're not like surprised on the first day of school and go, hey, wait, my money's not here. And it's because they didn't do verification. Anyway, verification is that most important final step. And it's 2:20. I think I'm done. I'm sorry. I wanted to show you all some other things.
We could probably squeeze a couple more minutes.
What?
We could probably do a couple more minutes, but
I think this video here after the FAFSA video, it's a 3-minute video. I just can't tell you how important I think that is. So let me see if I can find. These are our documents for the resources through federal financial aid. And here are all these different documents. Many of these documents are in, wait a minute, you're not seeing that, are you? Can you see it?
No, not yet.
Okay. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Okay, let me try this. Stop share and come back at it here. Here you go. Now you can see it, can't you?
Yes.
So this is, I gave you this link for this, and these are the examples of the things that they have. to use, and many of them are in Spanish as well as English, which I think is huge, working with our students. And some of these are just so, I mean, these types of federal student aid, et cetera, they're just excellent little videos, and they're real short, which makes them even better. So I'm going really fast through that, I know, but
And
you can.
those links are in the PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, well, I put, yes, they are. The link to this is in the PowerPoint.
Okay. And I made
So-
sure to upload it just now, so they're all on the Hoover website.
Okay, and I'm going to try one other thing just to show you just the beginning of it, if I can. I might not be able to do it.
We may have to wrap things up just because we have
I
another
think we need
session.
to, yes. But anyway, I'm sorry if I went fast. I'm sorry if I talked at you so much. I am super passionate about the FAFSA. I think that's kind of obvious. So it bleeds over in everything I do.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. I felt the passion and I found it really interesting. I don't even help students with their FAFSA. So yeah, great job. Let's give Rebecca a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll see you tomorrow for your second session.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.